definition of insanity again, Munch. Potent early game jungler, especially. We've seen Pantheons even go for a very quick clear to get that board drinker and then stride into that mid game with a lot of power thanks to that ultimate. And with the Orianna in the mid, Galio support, as we already talked about, very, very strong against this Leona matchup. So overall, I really like the composition from WE, especially with the amount of globals on this team. It is very hard for V5 to try and find any opportunity to push up aggressively. Now, the beauty, at least for V5, is that they are a front-to-back team fight. They are happy to just move as a 5-man unit towards these objectives, but it does mean that they become very vulnerable if they've got to answer for, say, Breathe in a side lane alongside Beishang, and then you can have the double globals with the likes of a Galio Engage or anything else. So it becomes a little bit more difficult for V5 to just find these easy ways of managing to group up and go for these team fights.
Well, WE might as well rebrand at this point to Worldwide Esports because they have pretty much every global in the game on their squad. They got the Shed, they got the Pantheon, they got the Galio, they even got a Kai'Sa that can blast halfway across the map with her ult. So this is going to be a highly mobile game. We set it up earlier, Dagda, as a team that wants to be making picks and snowballing through that. If this ain't a pick comp, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect pick comp. You've got like a beautiful 1-3-1 setup. You can come in and just aggressively find any member of V5. Because honestly, as V5, you're going to have to stick Longxing off in the side lane as this Ornn to try and deal with this threat in the side lane coming through from Breathe or from Beishang or anyone else. And from that point forward, cool, Breathe, you pop in over here. We can try and engage with the likes of the Galio and even the Pantheon as well, having that big man drop. So there's a lot of opportunities here for WE to find these very long-range engages that can be difficult for the 4-man squad of V5 to deal with. Especially when you look at the likes of like Syndra and Xayah. These are traditionally carries that like to have the enemy in front of them so they can kite back.
All right, I think that's the last of the Gyos. Never quite sure. Here we go, though. WE against V5. And just to remind you guys, this is V5's first series back in the LPL. This is their first series of the year of official LPL games. And they've gone for a fairly reserved composition when you think about how V5 historically has played. It's been an incredibly fast, incredibly aggressive, incredibly win lane, win game style of gameplay. That's not necessarily what we're seeing from this composition.
No, but and I think obviously you've got a lot of the scaling coming in from the Ornn, the Xayah as well. Like, this is going to be a much more later portion of the game that V5 are looking to play around. In the early stages of the game, I'd like to see them try and play around this mid-jungle 2v2. You have a very strong setup with the Syndra and also with the Graves, and you can do a lot of work specifically because you've got the Orianna there who's in a losing matchup and doesn't offer a lot in skirmishes. So I think if I'm on V5 side, this is where I'm looking to put a lot of my aggression in the early points of the game. Whereas over on the V5 side, we already talked about how potent this bottom side of the map is for them right now with the winning matchup. Add into the fact that you now have Breathe when he hits that level 6 and has the Stand United, same with Beishang. I think from WE's side, getting Jomung ahead is going to be the mainstay carry for this team and how they want to get in towards the mid game and try and push this advantage in their favor.
And isn't that just so surprising that WE would be playing around their bot lane? That's
Who
not
would've saw
something
this
we've
coming?
ever spoken about before. Yeah, if you cast your minds back, ladies and gentlemen, to last year, WE totally focused around playing around Jomung. And there's a reason for that. When you think about... Oh, hang on. We'll come back to the story of Jomung in a moment, because Weiwei could be in trouble here. PP God has moved over. They're just going to be dropping awards, staying as the buddy system here, missing a Jomung, moving together, get some vision. But the reason that this team plays so heavily around Jomung is when you don't, quite often, Dagda, he has a tendency to go a little too aggressive. Here we go. Beishang's turn to go aggressive here as he's just going to jump in, get some damage down onto Weiwei. Use the Aegis Assault to stop any return damage, but Smite was used by Weiwei, and that means Beishang could just snag that blue buff for himself and walk away happily.
And this is a really good job from WE. So they use the push advantage that they have in that bot lane. Remember what we talked about? Galio stepping super far forward in the early, or level 1, guarantees his push bot.
Oh, that was a beautiful little knock-up from Missing as PP God goes in, gets completely interrupted. Beishang, though, getting chased down by Weiwei. Aegis Assault will block a lot of the damage, and Income's missing to help him out. PP God's low, ignited, knocked up, and taken down for first blood. Weiwei jumped over the wall, but Jomung has followed him. The plasma goes down, Weiwei falls, and Beishang survives, and now Y4 finds himself alone in the fray. Has to try and get out with his life, and it's going to be a TP channeled by Mole just to keep his AD carry alive.
That was disastrous on V5's end of things. So obviously they lose the blue buff thanks to the support coming in from Jomung and missing the bot side, but trying to catch Beishang in transition, and they end up giving over more kills as well. V5 just not really understanding that, hey look, if we're going to go for these aggressive plays, there's way more CC and even damage honestly right now on the side of WE in that 3-man unit. Breathe now trying to steal away the scuttle on top side, but at least Weiwei will be here to solidify one crab for himself.
Weiwei finally gets one small victory for himself, and he's been trying real hard to get them all game, but it has been going the way of Beishang in these skirmishes. And I mean, let's be honest, that was a full-on 3v3 that went the way of WE in the end, but it's not that surprising when you've got things like the Pantheon and Kai'Sa with Halo Blades. They're incredibly strong during these early skirmishes.
Yeah, very burst orientated, like both from the Pantheon, even the Galio as well is very much kind of a, well, no pun intended, like 1-2 punch. Like, it's very, very much, hey, let's just take this guy and knock him out of the park. It's what they did there. They just focused down PP God, and PP God was only level 2 at the time as well, so didn't have access to his W to get all those extra resistances. So it means he is quite squishy in that trade. So surprised to see them go so heavily for that. But it does give it a lot of power to WE in this bottom side, and is playing into the game plan of what WE are looking for. Get Jomung ahead, but also get this Pantheon as quickly as possible through this Gore Drinker. Gore Drinker is obnoxious in current League of Legends. Patch 11.11 did nothing for it. It's patch 11.2 to talk about nerfing it. It desperately needs it. So the faster Pantheon can get to this Gore Drinker, the larger that power spike is going to be, and that's what WE are looking to work with.
And let's bear in mind, we've seen 2 little skirmishes so far, and Beishang has been invincible in both because of Aegis Assault. When you add that he could basically fully heal himself with Gore Drinker on top of that, suddenly it becomes a very tough situation. Y4 has Cleanse available, but there are no flashes here. Taunt going to come out on both. Y4 will survive, but you'd expect PP God to go down, but the root comes out, and here's Weiwei to answer the play. V5 have turned this one completely on its head, and WE are left to flee for their lives. Jomung alone as he dashes out with the supercharge.
And there's the difference when Leona has access to those extra resistances off for W. They can't kill PP God fast enough, especially because he does a great job of getting that aftershock off first. You're not able to burst down the Leona, and from that point, with Weiwei having a brilliant job of tracking what Beishang's game plan is, moves down towards the bottom side and helps out V5 in turning that play around. Gorgeous stuff from Weiwei.
And you can see it as well that the top laners have now hit that level 6 mark. So any more shenanigans on the bottom side, and Breathe will have the ability to contest, kind of like he's contesting right now on this control ward that they're just going to be tiptoeing around and dancing around. Breathe is going to have his wave pushing in towards that top side though, and Weiwei is in the top side of the jungle right now.
Yeah, he's going to be fine here. I mean, Longxing just wants to freeze this lane. The problem that you're going to have, though, is that, like, from Longxing's perspective, if you freeze this wave, it is opening up Breathe to try and make these Stand United plays. Level 6 has now been hit by the Shen, so you need to be very careful that you're not just giving a free time to Breathe, but at least Longxing, because you got the Call of the Forge God, has multiple different ways, as long as he keeps Vision of Breathe, to cancel out that ultimate. So it's going to be very much kind of a cat and mouse game with the ultimates in the top side of the map. But I believe, again, we're going to see more attention down towards this bottom side of the map. This is really where we're going to try and get both Weiwei, trying to see now with PP God having a little bit more in the tank, if they can turn this around, but also just trying to stop Beishang from enacting the early game. Because again, V5, they scale so much better.
So I have to ask a question of, what does Longxing do here? Like, what's the correct play? Because it feels like if he freezes, then he's setting up Breathe to succeed. If they get an extended laning phase, I mean, I don't think Breathe is going to really want to allow that. He's going to want to ult out of the lane. What do you do as the Ornn when TP's on cooldown?
The best thing to do is to hold the wave slightly on your side, just because it still means, okay, like, I can keep an eye on Breathe, but I still have the opportunity to very quickly shove this needed. The issue, of course, is if you overextend here as Longxing, it's very easy for Beishang to come up towards that top side, kill you, and then still unlock Breathe. So you want to try and keep this wave slightly close to your turret, so you're still safe, but able to keep somewhat pressure.
Looks like Jomung has committed to staying in the bottom lane here, but the rest of WE have still tried to contest that. I'm not entirely sure what was going through Missing's head there, because when your AD carries at the bottom side of the map, that's essentially a 4 versus 5.
Yeah, I don't want to be taking skirmishes here as WE is on the top side of the map. A lot of their power is based on that bottom side. Like, Orianna doesn't offer a huge amount in these early game skirmishes at Rift Herald. I'm saying when you look at Breathe, in comparison to the likes of this Ornn with the amount of CC Ornn brings, so from WE side, you're better off just backing away. They do blow a flash, but no one goes down. But V5 again, watch this. PP God getting out of bot lane, instantly making these plays top. And this is how V5 like to snowball their games, is through this Rift Herald usage.
An incredibly smart play here coming out from V5. They're probably going to be able to get themselves first tower of the game. But importantly as well, Breathe can't impact the skirmishers if you bring the skirmish to him. Stan United, he wants to get out of that top lane. When you lane swap into him and use that Herald, suddenly this Shen has a much harder time really impacting anything.
And that's been the go-to strategy in a lot of cases against the Shen, is when you see him hit level 6, try and actually rotate your bot side up and go for a
Weiwei's had his recall cancelled here, and it looks like Y4 is not interested in helping the team. They're like, Weiwei, you are the sacrifice. The sacrifice has been made. That's his second death
and the instant pause. The instant pause after going, hold on a second, I need to talk to this guy. Where do you think you're going, huh? But yeah,
rolls
Y4
up
was
his
like,
sleeves.
Yeah. And look, you can see Mole on your screen looking between the two going, I don't want to be in the middle of this argument, but it actually does look like Y4 is having an issue, at least with the ref going over towards him there. But overall, I still think this is a very positive sign from V5. Like, we wanted to see again this core 3 working together. The Weiwei, Mole, and PP God. PP God moving up alongside Y4 into that top lane skirmish, gets the Rift Herald, instantly pumping a whole bunch of gold into Y4 as well. Because again, we've seen what Xayah's been like throughout this week, where she just needs so much time to scale up that the likes of these Kai'Sas and Jins are just having a much larger impact in this game before Xayah can. The fact you've now invested in all 5 turret plates in towards the Xayah, she's picked up a kill in that bottom lane as well. She's now starting to get to the point where she will have access to their 3-item spike that you need with the Infinity Edge a lot quicker than what we have been traditionally seeing throughout this week at LPL.
One of the positives I will say about Xayah, though, is when you look at the style of composition that WE are running here and the way that they want to win the game. They want to find a pick and explode off the back of that, win a 5v4 team fight, etc., right? Xayah is one of the best AD carries at surviving those kind of compositions. If it is Y4 that the pick is meant to be happening on, Xayah just leaps into the air, flashes back, zips on out of the fight. We've seen it hundreds of times in the Kai'Sa Xayah meta of, 2019? So we very much could see, actually, V5, if they can play around that and use that Xayah ult effectively, that's a great way to play around a pick style composition.
I agree, and especially now that like Gale Force has a little bit of extra mobility as well, like, and how potent it is just with the damage. I think we're going to see them avoid the Xayah altogether. They're going to be looking more towards the Syndra and the Graves, specifically the Syndra. Like, if you have Pantheon ult in behind, you've now got 2 different directions as the Syndra, where you've got to try and figure out where do I extend my Scout of the Week. It becomes way too difficult to figure out. So just Paul diving on this Syndra becomes a very, very easy game plan to execute. And Mo needs to be so careful as we start to go in towards this mid game that he's not just getting caught out in a lot of situations.
So apparently Weiwei has had a in-game issue, so that's what the pause is for right now, and hopefully they should be able to figure out what the issue is, resolve it ASAP so we can get back into the game. But I do want to go back to something that we mentioned earlier on. With the roster changes that V5 have made to their squad, it's really interesting to see such a dramatically different draft to what we're used to out of V5, with a much more late game focused style. Because when you think back to like playoffs, when you think back to the end of summer, every single game from V5 was like running things like the Callista in the bottom lane, right? It was like win the game by 15 minutes, snowball out of control, if we get past 25 minutes in the game, we lose 100% of the time. That was the level of speed at which you expected out of a V5 series. But this composition is very, like, we've got a late game crit AD carry. We've got obviously Syndra doesn't exactly do terribly in the early game, but certainly does well in the late game as well. And then an Ornn on the top side. You've got a scaling jungler in the Graves. Like, this feels like they want to change their identity a little bit this year.
Certainly, and I think a lot of that kind of stems from the new guys that they brought in. Like Long Xing has, when he was on LGD, traditionally played a huge amount of Ornn, has been that weak side top laner, and certainly Ornn is something that just has been staple for him for so long that they're just going, okay, cool, let's see what we can do with Long Xing's style, see if he can still have that impact when we get towards the later portion. And honestly, I think that a lot of that kind of stemmed from the shot calling and stuff. Like, their early to mid game shot calling in V5 was excellent. The late game shot calling, whenever it did get tested, wasn't that strong. Now that you're bringing in Long Xing, who's shown that he can be certainly a shot caller in a lot of situations, you can have the likes of Wei Wei and PP God control the shot calling in the early stages of the game and lend Long Xing then a little bit more control in the late game, and he can kind of pinpoint exactly how you want to go and where you want to play. And I think that was something that BuBu was certainly lacking, was that understanding of late game decision making as a top laner, whereas with the veterancy that Long Xing has, he certainly knows how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Long Xing is not exactly a new player. So just a replay of the pick that we saw onto Wei Wei. Stayed a little bit too long, tried to get too much off the back of the Herald play. But ultimately, still a positive play for V5. Like, even with that pick, they still got the first tower of the game. Still great use of the Rift Herald. We quite often see Rift Heralds go to waste. It's good to see it used so effectively here.
The difference that you can see, though, for Wei Wei is he has picked up that Gale Force, so has hit that one item spike, which is incredibly strong for the burst damage on Graves that comes with Gale Force. However, he is sitting behind in farm when it look over at Beishang, and Wei Wei has been very much more focused on the lanes, as you can see, like turning around bot lane plays, working towards Rift Heralds and pushing that in topside. So we can see the different styles of these two junglers, where Wei Wei, even when he's on stuff like the Graves, is still much more kind of lane orientated, whereas Beishang, even on something like a Pantheon, is still farming up a storm and will have the support of his team to make sure he can do that.
Yeah, and this is the nature of jungle right now, and it was a sort of a similar story at Worlds as well, where quite often how quickly and how effectively you can farm the jungle depends on your team, because when counter jungling is one of the most important factors in the jungle at the minute, like, you need to have priority in your lanes. You need to know that your lanes can follow you up and help you out. And Scuttle Crabs especially, the fact that Beishang was able to just waltz in and take the early blue buff away from Wei Wei, all of these small factors add into what's happening with this CS differential.
And it's why, I mean, as we said, a lot of these teams are heavily focused on, hey, look, can we get priority mid? What's the story of priority bot lane? Because are you on top? At least if you can have priority in one side of the map, it makes things a hell of a lot easier to make that heavy jungle style work, because you can get invades, have the backup from your team. But unfortunately, when you look over the V5 side, we already talked about bot lane being on the back foot. Mole hasn't quite been able to get as much of an advantage in this lane as you would expect. Honestly, this is very well played from Shanks, literally from the get-go. Like, level 1, he invested a whole bunch of mana and his health bar so he could contest Mole, so he could always dip across and help out Beishang if needed on that early invade. And as the game has started to go forward, Mole has been dragged out of lane a lot more with the TP down towards the bot side, and Shanks has been doing a great job of farming up a storm here and getting an advantage in what is traditionally a Syndra favoured matchup.
And let's just bear in mind as well that even with the TP that Mole sent towards the bottom side, he didn't actually get involved in a fight. He just walked straight up towards the mid lane. So the CS differential being almost 30 in favor of Shanks is actually very impressive. Like, let's bear in mind that this is a player that we've come into this series saying, look, he looked pretty good in the first series we saw from him, but he's still relatively unproven, relatively untested. This is the guy that has to come in, replace Teachamar, who defined the entire style of WE last year, and he's been looking fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that we're looking out for. Again, like we talked about the savvy solo laners, is how do these guys... Okay, no, we're just going for a quick trade. How do these guys influence what WE even is capable of? Well, you're seeing it already. I mean, Breathe in their first series looked absolutely impeccable on things like the Renekton and really was the big engage tool. And now where he's gone over towards a very different style on the Shen.
Oh, Jomung's going for it. Just gonna trade ults. Like, I don't think you're ever going to be able to get the kill when Void Seeker is on cooldown and you've and you're against the Xayah, so she can just ult. Here we go. TP's coming on through though. PP God flashes to get the stun onto Mystic, who's just removed from the play. Shockwave on the backside onto Mole, and there's a taunt to follow it up. Jomung's here with the damage, but a triple knockup comes out from Lanxing, and it looks like V5 might be able to sweep this one up. Beishang's there, though, and Lanxing has to flash away. Wei trying to chase down Shanks, but he's gone too far, and he's taken down, and now Y4 is going to get cut through like a hot knife through butter as Beishang charges on forward. Doesn't quite hit with the Gore Drinker, though. Y4 trying to get away, and he will actually be able to trade one.
Just about able to get one back, but honestly, that was miscalled from V5. They are the later scaling composition. You've just used the ultimate in the bottom lane for Y4 that is so crucial for the safety of Xayah in this team fight. And they still tried to take the fight against WE, who are on a far better position. They had full control of this river. They were able to separate out V5. Like, this was just a really poor decision from V5 to try and take that fight.
And when we look at the carries, they're starting to get some gold. Let's take another look at how this actually started, because it was Beishang going in on PP God. PP God was like, I'm down to fight.
Yeah, but you're not down to fight, because look at where you had your team set up. They were coming back trying to wrap around, and now they're trying to set up for this front-to-back team fight, but you've already been separated out by WE. V5, Wei has moved up towards his top side to try and get onto Shanks, which means that Y4 essentially ends up in a 1v2 here as long as Shin's got a piece out, which means that Jomung is just zoning him entirely, and we're going again!
We're going again, missing with the 4-man entrance right there. Shockwave onto 3 as well. That is a beautiful team fight from WE, and Jomung with yet another 2 kills, 4 now on the board.
What's the definition of insanity again, Munch? It's doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that it keeps working. Like, I don't know why V5 didn't go, you know what, guys? It didn't work out the first time. What we'll do is give them a whole heap more gold and then see if it works a second time. That's not the strategy. It's a bold move, Cotton. It's not working out. You need to figure out a different plan here. It's a second dragon. It's a Cloud Drake. What you really want to be doing here is V5 instead is building up your cards, setting Y4 off in towards this mid lane, as you can see now. Let him start to farm up, get some chip damage on towards this mid lane turret, get the standing gold that's on the map. WE are perfectly happy to have you come and fight them like that because their composition right now is incredibly strong. And we're going to get a replay, but again, this is the kind of the pick potential that we were talking about. Delivering this Pantheon in towards the back line. Y4 not having his ultimate up and available, so it was just burnt alongside with all of his summoner spells in the last one, which gives WE a very easy job of getting on towards these immobile backliners and shutting them down.
I love how this composition from WE, if you group up like that, you don't get to play. With a Galio ult, with an Orianna ult on top of it, Shen with the taunts, like, you really don't get to play a grouped up fight like that. Hang on, we could have yet another fight. V5 really are playing with fire this game. But let's just remember as well that these fights around the 15 to 20 minute mark, this is WE's comfort zone. This is where they have always thrived as a team. Hang on, Weiwei's going for the fight here. Jomung's going to be fine, but the flash from Mole, cleanse to get away from the stun. Mole's just out of range, he can't use his ultimate. And it means that Jomung gets away.
Jomung, yeah, will be able to back. He'll be able to come out onto the map as well and should be able to collect this bottom lane wave if he wants. So Jomung, although does lose the cleanse, doesn't lose out too much in the meanwhile. And this is something that's now becoming a little bit of an issue for V5 is, remember what we talked about with this massive global composition that WE has? It's going to be kind of difficult for you to play off in these side lanes. You can see Wei and PP God moving down here to support Mole in case any funny business happens. You've got Y4 who's a little bit safer in mid, but certainly as this game goes on, picking up more farm is going to be difficult. So for V5, the fact that they aren't using the opportunities like these dragons to funnel gold into the key carries on their team means that they'll have more trouble later on picking up that gold and having as much of it.
Well, this bot lane tower will go down. It's traded for a mid lane tower here, which does mean we're still at 2 towers apiece. It's going to be the mid lane surviving for WE and top lane surviving for V5 right now. But it wouldn't surprise me too much to see WE try and put some pressure on towards that topside tower. I don't think realistically V5 could contest them if they wanted to. But with no heralds coming up anytime soon, with Dragon up in 2 minutes, maybe WE want to just stick towards the bottom side.
I think the best way for WE here to approach this is getting down that top side turret, seeing if they can get some vision control in, and then look to try and operate that global comp. Because the best thing for WE right now would be like if Missing, Beishang, and maybe even Jomong can move in as this 3-man unit, take control, and then look for people in transition of V5 as they try to go towards the different lanes that the likes of Breathe are situated.
Oh, hang on. Missing has gone a bit too deep on this one. Has a shield to keep himself alive. Aftershock there as well, but he's not tanky enough. That's going to be a nice, easy pickup for V5.
And it buys a lot of space for them, because again, if V5 are able to hold on to these outer turrets, that makes things a heck of a lot easier for them as this game goes forward. They'll get time to scale. You can see 5 kills already there from Wei Wei. Longxing is going to be only 2 levels away from starting to gift out some of these Ornn items. Like, they're now getting to a point where, okay, I mean, we're starting to crest the hill. Let's see if we can keep this one going.
And when we take a look at items across the board, I mean, you're mentioning the items coming in for Y4 with the 2 crit items. Same can be said for Jomung, where he's got the Collector now, so he's very much into assassin mode when it comes to that. I will say, though, Missing, despite having a couple of good team fights on this Galio, is actually really not having a great game. 0 and 5. When we consider that Missing is one of the players that we so regularly hype up on the side of WE, like when he's playing his Thresh, when he's playing things like the Leona, can be an exceptional player. Here on the Galio, I think he's maybe overestimating how tanky he is a couple of times.
He's also not going to have the best of scorelines because of his role in this team. Like, he is the engage tool, and... Hang on. No, so he's okay. But look, he has to be the one moving in here, because you've got Breathe in a side lane who wants to ult in on top of Missing to deliver himself towards that back line. Same when you look at like the likes of Beishang. Like, Missing is essentially going in to be the follow-up on top of that. And he's going to get focused down first. He's not particularly tanky right now, especially when you don't even have your first item complete as the support. So he's going to pay the brunt of the cost.
Forge God comes through onto Missing here. Beishang just flies in from the side to get into that one. Breathe forces a flash out from Wei Wei there. I think Wei Wei just realizing he'd gone a little bit too deep for this one. Importantly, that is going to be Beishang's ult used before this dragon fight, but it's in trade for PP God and Lanxing's massive engage tools. You'd expect WE to have an advantage here as they start to move in. Beishang positioning aggressively, aggressed upon, but he's invincible because he's Pantheon, and now into the pit they go as PP God should fall. Smite takes the dragon in favor of WE. Great knockups from Lanxing, but nobody's gone down yet. In comes Galio as Jomung is free-firing. Beishang's onto Mole at the backside. Y4's alone as it'll be taken down by the Acathian Rain, and it is a downpour, let me tell you. Lanxing now, he's in a 2v1. He's got some knockups, but he doesn't have any damage. It's a 5v5 clean ace for WE.
And V5 just weren't able to buy space for their backline. Longxing tries to go step up forward with PP God, but WE just bypass them entirely. They get on towards the squishies, and from that point, WE steal the dragon. They're going to steal away this Baron, and they might just steal away this game, Munchables.
This is looking pretty fantastic for WE right now, as they're going to be able to grab this Baron completely uncontested. They take it exceptionally quickly as well. And now V5, yes, they've got a decent amount of scaling on their squad. Yes, they can front-to-back teamfight theoretically, but how well can they survive against this Baron push?
You can see the play here, though. Like, this is where WE are at their strongest, that this 2-item spike that they picked up. But there's so many different angles at attack here that the front line just disintegrates from V5. You've got Missing, who manages to get on towards Mole and also onto Wei Wei on the top side of the fight. You've got PP God, who's down to Beishang on the bottom side. And Longxing just ends up kind of going, where the hell am I supposed to go here? From that point, WE, with the amount of backline threat coming through from Jomung too, are able to split open this fight, make it very difficult for V5 to find the front-to-back that they're looking for, and take the fight as a result.
And it feels like Longxing didn't... It's not like Longxing did anything wrong there, right? It's just that there's so much mobility from WE that, like you say, the front line just separates. They can't cover all sides. They can't front to back because WE are at the front and the back.
And that's the thing. I would have preferred to see in that fight if V5 had actually maneuvered themselves up into the choke point. This makes it a lot more difficult for like Breathe and Beishang and Shanks to actually find the opportunities to get onto like the likes of Wei Wei, and then you can regroup as V5, and as WE all congregate in that pit, you can try and take that fight. It's just the positioning on the angle of attack for V5 was just not playing into the strengths of this composition.
So we see Jomung And Shanks here, very much slow pushing with this Baron wave. They're trying to buy time for the rest of the squad to start to pressure onto towers. You can see they're going to pressure all across the map. Breathe in the bottom lane, but obviously he's Shed. He can join up with the rest of the squad as soon as anything happens from the side of V5.
And again, they're just trying to put this little bit of chip damage down. Beishang, the other global, is in the mid lane pushing.
Yeah. Like, you have a Pantheon mid, so he can get over. You got a Shed bot, so he can... This is the perfect, like, split push composition.
But this is the thing. It's like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's like, okay, well, Beishang's pushing mid. If Beishang's in trouble, we got Shen who can come in and Galio can come in from top side. If they invest too many players to the bot side, Beishang transitions down to the bottom lane. You've got, like, everyone just protecting all points in time, and it's just like, what the hell do you do as V5? You commit members anywhere, you're still losing out on the map.
Yeah, so Breathe is going to be pressuring on the bot side. Just staying out of range, though. Has to stay safe, because realistically, you would think that the way V5 could punish is to try and commit onto... Oh, hang on, Y4. Ult for ult with the AD carries there. Over the wall now onto Lan Xing, and that's a lot of CC. He is not tanky enough to deal with this just yet. And you see, as soon as anyone's caught, everyone just slams across the map into the fight.
And it's classic WE. These picks are their bread and butter all the goddamn time. They get the pick onto Lan Xing there. Now they get this bottom lane tower. They've already picked up that tower on the top. Mid isn't long for this world either. Like, this is just beautiful, clean closeout from WE. And what we all hoped for. What we wanted to see when we saw this WE team on paper.
That was close. PP God nearly catches missing. But importantly, this is also respectful from WE. If there's one negative we could say about WE from last year, it's that sometimes they didn't necessarily play the safest, most respectful League of Legends. But you see a minute left on the Dragon, immediately everyone resets, and now WE come back onto the map. They're already on Soul Point. If they get this Ocean Drake, they'll have an Ocean Soul. And at that point, I think that's over for V5.
And you haven't crested the item breakpoints for V5 yet. 3 items was what we said. They haven't hit that yet. You're still waiting on that Infinity Edge coming through for Y4. WE are still incredibly strong right now, especially Shanks having just finished off the Void Staff. With the 10,000 gold lead they have, WE should be able to take this fight if they're able to play correct.
Here we go. Keep your eyes on Jomung flying towards the back line with his Killer Instinct. It's going to be Lan Xing's ult used for very little. By the way, Breathe is just pushing. Yeah. He's looking for an in-hit right now. In they go. Beishang quite happy to tank everybody up. Actually has a stopwatch to keep himself alive as well. Jomung's gone onto the back line, onto Mole. He's 1 versus 4 right now. The rest of the squad finally catching up to help him out, and he survives the skirmish. In goes Breathe, and down goes the entire squad for V5. This is the perfect way to play this composition. WE have played a blinder.
WE have absolutely knocked this composition out of the park. Understanding where their strengths are, how to get Beishang into the key members of V5 at pretty much every point in time. They have an exposed Hibber in the top lane. They can just look to end.
Yeah, this is going to be over, I'm pretty sure. Death Time is getting shot on PP God, but I'm not sure what he can do on his own right here. Towers will fall. Beishang ults on in just to be a part of the victory. And wow, what a way to start the series. 20-8